Good day, everyone. Hi, I'm Jay Schwartz. I'm Vice President, Customer Engagement here at Indegene, and I'm responsible in the Omnichannel Activation Marketplace. Really excited to chat with you all today, and we have a special guest that will be joining us. I've been having a great time so far, enjoying the sessions, and I hope you have as well. And so our special guest with us today is Ashish Jajoo, who is the head of digital marketing, tail products, and strategy at Viatris. Ashish, how are you doing?
Hey, good afternoon, Jay. This is great, and yeah, the summit has been wonderful so far. I'm hoping the audience is enjoying it too.
Yeah, it seems that way, right? From the chatter we've been seeing, it looks like everyone's having a really good time and enjoying the conversations and discussions. So yeah, I'm really excited for this session as well and excited to chat with you today. And so we're going to jump right in. We're going to really get into deep in a number of key issues and topics that are going on in the world around omni-channel. And you, I know, have tremendous expertise and experience in this area, so we'll really benefit from your knowledge and insights. So why don't we jump in a number of companies in the industry are really a bit all over the map, right? As we've discussed previously, relative to utilizing omni-channel as one of their key strategies and go to market. And so for those companies that are really early in their omni-channel progression, how do you recommend that they stage their omni-channel activation?
So, first of all, thank you for having me, and good afternoon, good morning, good evening, as may apply for wherever you are, everybody. Um, I think companies that are starting off right now in their omni-channel journey, right, they have a significant advantage, in my opinion. I humbly call it the late mover advantage, and we'll talk about that maybe if we have an opportunity later on. But essentially, what I think, Jay, is for an organization, it is extremely important for them to first take a look at their portfolio and then define the vision and focus for what their organization is going to look to engage their customers with, how they want to engage their customers, right? Um, and then define the scope of what that vision would look like, right? So basically, instead of going big picture and then just throwing darts at everything, let's focus on what is achievable, what is going to make sense in the context of the organization, and then move forward. So after that, define what good looks like for your organization. How are you going to measure it? And oh, by the way, then it is steps to embark on the journey to actually become omni-channel present. You would have to define your marketing technology stack according to the vision and the goals that you laid out. You would have to identify the platforms that are going to support you in that, configure and enable those platforms, while parallelly determining what your customer journeys and customer experiences are going to look like, develop the content and engagement methodologies for that. So it is a complicated journey. However, it is something that can be done in multiple phases. Once you have your platforms and channels available, you have your content available, you have your customer journeys identified, then you come to activation of those channels and the platforms. Right? What does activation mean? Because that is something that we all struggle with always. To me, it is very simple. You do not want to go the whole shebang at one point in time.
Right.
In my humble opinion, perfect is the enemy of good. Start with good. In digital, good is really a great starting point. You can course correct rapidly. A lot of people say that you can do it right only once. I beg to differ. You can do right and course correct in digital because it is not as um, you know set in concrete as you would some of the other traditional channels. Then, once you have activated these channels, measure the performance of the channel and the overall ecosystem that you put in place as an activation mechanism. Right? Once you start measuring them, ladder up to the KPIs that you said initially on what good looked like for your organization. Don't worry about industry benchmarks. Sometimes
Right.
we get too worried about what does the industry benchmark say. Yes, but industry is not me. I am part of the industry, but it is at the same time, it is all about how am I performing? Am I meeting my expectations or meeting them? If not, what course corrections do I have to make? And this is how you learn and evolve. So, to me, those organizations that are starting off on their omnichannel progression now, it's a great time for them because they can really move very rapidly.
Yeah, exactly. I could think from a number of different initiatives I've been involved with over the year where it's been somewhat new for the organization. And in those situations, we always talk about walk before running, right? Really making sure you're getting your foundation in place. And as you say, really measuring. And speaking about measuring, how long do you think, as an organization is putting in place their omni-channel activation, what do you think is an appropriate amount of time for if they're doing some initial pilots or experimentation or just looking to gain an understanding of how well their initial efforts are going? What do you think that appropriate amount of time looks like?
That's a great follow on. And again, I do want to make sure that I state this rather clearly that these are absolutely my personal opinions and my own point of view. I'm not representing Beatrice's point of view here. However, um, in the case of proofs of concepts or pilots, right? These are extremely important in terms of pushing the envelope or going down a path of innovation and learning, right? And these are extremely important toward that. Um, and I've personally always maintained that to get to an omni-channel stage or an activation of digital channels, you've got to energize your data. Because if you really are looking to engage with the C-suite on how omni-channel is going to be impactful, then that energizing data is going to activate your digital. But the way to put it to them would be data activation is to digital what innovation is to transformation. Because at the end of the day, if you're looking to transform something, you need to innovate. Similarly, if you need to activate digital, you need data. Now, the reason I go down this path is because we are looking to do either innovation, disruption, or activation of digital through some of these POCs and pilots. Coming to the POCs and their duration, right? Some POCs can be 3 to 6 months, while others can be 18 to 36 months. It totally depends upon the goals and the hypothesis that you really want to prove through this POC, right? So at the end of the day, it is the circumstances that you are facing as an organization, both internally and externally, which will determine the duration of these proofs of concepts. Are you getting sufficient data back to make an informed decision? Right? We always talk about informed decision, but informed decision comes from data, which actually goes from data to information and then knowledge, which is what you act on. So it is really synthesizing it all and bringing it together. My personal experience is that from being in the industry really long enough, have had a good fortune of being part of some really interesting pilots and proofs of concepts over the years. Right, whether it is activating a channel with different types of contents or different form factors of engagement, all the way to new business models of how we would go to market. Obviously, the learnings have been tremendous and enormous, and they have helped me personally, and of course, the organization, move forward. The organization that I was associated with move forward at every stage of the way.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ashish. In essence, this is a bit of art, right? Every situation, every product, every market may be a little bit different where you're initially putting in a program, and so really kind of judging what's an appropriate amount of time is going to be very different depending upon the situation. I know from my experience in the field, and I think this is not going to be much different when we're talking from a digital perspective. But when you're building relationships with HCPs, you usually go through a little bit of a cycle, right? Where you're first establishing trust, you're trying to personalize and gain an understanding of each other, and then you're also trying to keep things fairly simple, right? And really be specific in communicating with the customer. Can you think of those kind of three experiences, if you will, when we're interacting with customers, and how that could relate when we're going through a digital program? We're going through an omni-channel activation experience with a customer. How do those relationships kind of come to bear?
So that is a very good but a tricky question. It's an important one. But to me, it's also a very philosophical question, Jay, at an organization level, right? Because a lot depends on what your belief is as an organization in terms of customer relationship, because there's no right or wrong answer to this one, right? The way I personally perceive it, right? For me, customer trust is of paramount importance. That to me is customer relationship nirvana.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Now, if how do you achieve that? You achieve that through personalization and contextualization, building those relationships up. And how do you get there? By keeping your message simple. I mean, it's not me, right? About 500 years ago, Da Vinci was the one who said this: is simplicity is the ultimate form of sophistication. um, I guarantee you that I do not have neither the brain power nor the capacity to challenge that. I really have embraced it and love the fact that if you can keep things simple, build on top of it something which is personalized and contextualized for the customer, you will gain their trust. And therefore, for me, those are the steps. They're not independent of one another. They are actually a progression and not necessarily a linear progression either. Once you've gotten to that innermost layer of trust, right, which is the most important part, then your relationships become very easy. And the reason I say that is because all you need to now do is keep reminding your customer
Right.
of your presence. You are not now trying to sell them anything, right? You're just making that aware, hey, I am here, and therefore it makes it very easy and seamless, because you don't obviously want to be in out of mind kind of a situation. But to me, to get to that trust level is really what is important. That's one of the most significant values that omnichannel brings to an organization, is the trust and relationship that the field force can build, not just at an individual level but at an organization level, and then use digital as a force multiplier on top of that, which basically would become a go-to market strategy for you.
Exactly. Yeah, I think we have so many different ways we could go with omni-channel, and there's so many different initiatives you can put in, and the the potential is there to make things more complex. But I really like your wisdom here about really keeping things very simple, and that will enable you to build trust and further the relationship, whether it was initiated by a sales representative and you're augmenting and adding on, or if you're only engaging with that customer digitally. So really great insight there. I know, Ashish, earlier on we talked a little bit about the late mover advantage, right? And you referred to it and you said, "Hey, we'll come back and chat about it." And I think it's a great one to really talk about, and maybe add a little bit more substance behind. So, when you're thinking about this late mover advantages, what are what are we talking about relative to the advantages? What do we find where you find actually to be most significant?
So, late mover advantage, Jay, is something that the way I personalize this or contextualize it for myself is um, organizations that began a journey, let's say 15 years ago, versus those that began a journey maybe 5 to 7 years ago, versus those that are beginning their journey now. The the technologies that are available, the platforms and capabilities that are available are vastly different, right? So those that began the journey 15 years ago now have a technical debt as compared to what you have the capability available in the market 5 or 7 years ago versus what
Right.
you have available today, right? So that to me makes a very significant late mover advantage who's for those organizations that are starting now, because they don't have to worry about things like when 15 years ago one would have to think about, oh, how am I going to do consent management? Now I can put an RFP out and say I am in the market for consent management, and it can actually you can get a good set of responses for that, right?
Right.
So to me, getting that into that frame of mind of leveraging the most modern technology that can help you get out of the blocks quickly, and not have to rethink twice about the enablement part of it, right? Because enablement unfortunately sometimes becomes the long pole in the tent, right? Whereas what the customer experiences is the activation part of it. And we internally kind of start to, it becomes the tail that wags the dog, then, where the enablement piece is all we're struggling with. Whereas our real value to the customer is on the engagement or activation side. So to me, the time to market for late movers is much quicker than the time to market for some that started the journey way back in the boonies of time in terms of technology.
Yeah, and I like your point too, relative to technologies moving so quickly, right? What was available maybe 2 years ago, when you look at today, is completely changed, right? And it's advancing every day and every month. So, really great insight there. Um, I know in your role, you are essentially in a global role, and you're looking for particular product areas, and you're also responsible for digital strategy in those areas. So when you're developing your global strategy, right, and trying to develop a global omni-channel capability as one of those strategies, how does that um, you know meet up with various countries, right? And what the countries are trying to achieve in their local strategies, and what you're trying to achieve from a global omni-channel perspective.
So it really ladders up very well to the previous conversation, Jay. And the reason I say that is because if we look at the overall capability, right? The capability consists of the enablement part of the platforms, right? It consists of content and customer journeys and personalizations and all of those things. But it also has a very significant portion of governance that is applied to it. It is channel level governance, it's platform level governance, it's brand level governance, it's all of these that come together. And yet somehow somebody has to magically make it work. And oh, by the way, guess what? When you look at the world map, there is no country out there which is called global. There are countries which have their own regulatory environment, and you got to follow those whether you like it or not, that is how it works, right? So activation happens locally. You can think about all of these capabilities at a global level, but then you have to apply them locally. Make sure that the local priorities and the global priorities are aligned, right? Because whether we like it or not, from a global perspective, local priorities sometimes may differ from what the global priorities
Yeah.
are. Right? The motivations are different. I wouldn't say the priorities, I may have misstated that. Priorities might still be the same, but the motivations will be different. And the motivation to change is and transform is much higher typically at a global level than at a local level. So establishing that relationship with the local teams to be able to bring them along, build a consensus in the direction that you are headed in as an organization, having them to believe in the vision of the organization, the capabilities that you're putting together, and therefore moving the organization forward is really the challenge in those roles. And to be honest with you, that is the opportunity, not just for an individual and a team, but also the organization itself.
Yep. Yeah, that sounds great. I really appreciate how you're working closely with each of those markets, right? And kind of having an understanding of what the that opportunity for that specific market is relative to omni-channel. So, you know, obviously, and you know this from as well from not just your portfolio, but as you've been in the industry and other portfolios, we have products at all levels of their product life cycle. And, obviously your focus here currently in tail products, but I know you've been involved also in a lot of launch products and products in the middle of their product life cycle. Are some of those things that you're taking into consideration when you're using omni-channel and you're thinking about what stage a product is relative to the life cycle? Are there, I imagine there's some cost considerations that you're thinking about. There's sales force considerations you're thinking about, the level of marketing investment. What are some of the things that kind of come top to mind to you?
Yeah, so I think trying to keep it very simple, Jay, right? Because we established that as a working principle earlier, right? To me, the way I would see it is if you are in a launch phase of a product, then overall digital and omni-channel becomes a supplementary strategy to your typical traditional field force driven activation.
Right,
It, as your product starts to mature, you are in the 24 to 60-month time frame of launch, you're now starting to look at it as a combination of supplementary and complementary strategies. Whereas if you now are in a plateau of your growth phase of a product, or you go LOE, let's say,
right,
then you might actually be looking at a complete substitution of the strategies that you have in terms of digital being the capability that leads from the front, right? So that's how I perceive it in my head, on how we should be looking at what digital does. I do not see for one second that digital will live on its own, especially for products that are launch plus 60 months. It
right.
has to be a combination there.
Got no, exactly, and I really like how you're thinking of it right as a key component of strategy, launch onwards. But what that level of involvement and whether it's a supplement or primary role really depends upon LOE and all those type of things. So, uh, totally agree. And maybe we could get into one last question here, Ashish, and we'll see what questions we may have from the audience as well. But just one last question, and this could be a lengthy one, so maybe we make it specific to a particular stage of the product life cycle. But when you're looking to evaluate your omni-channel effort and your program, what measurements do you think are most critical, right, when trying to qualify the impact you're seeing from omni-channel?
So, Jay, I think there is only one measurement that is really the most impactful one, and that's
Right.
the almighty currency sign of that particular country that you're operating in,
Right.
right? Whether it's the dollar or the pound or the euro, or Indian rupee or whatever it is, right? That applies. Everything else has to ladder up. Every metric that you apply, every KPI that you derive needs to somehow or the other ladder up to the impact that you will have on the top and the bottom line.
Right.
So creating KPIs, identifying KPIs that would ladder up to it and be able, you would be able to make a clear measurement of it. How would you assess the impact of those channels is really the art of the possible at that point in time. I hope
Absolutely.
that gives you a little bit of a flavor of our world here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I really appreciate this opportunity here. We've had a great conversation, really enjoyed it.